Hello, and welcome to the Integration Hypothesis Let's Empower Women and Girls Google Hangout, hosted by FHI 360 and Girls Globe. My name is Diane Fender, and I'm the Vice President of Girls Globe, which is a constantly growing global network of bloggers, advocates, and organizations who are raising awareness about the rights and health and empowerment of women and girls around the world, both on and offline. This hangout is a follow-up to a conversation FHI 360's Integration Hypothesis series, which is advancing the global conversation on using collaborative integrated development solutions to address increasingly complex development issues. This series is also a part of a new $4 million in multi-year investment to build a global body of evidence of when, how, and where to link the design and delivery of programs, as well as to determine the degree to which integrated approaches are cost-effective and sustainable. Today we are joined by an amazing group of panelists. These individuals are thought leaders and those working at a community level to empower women and girls through integrated development solutions. Those of you watching and participating online can follow the conversation using the hashtag IntegratedDev, and you can also ask questions via Twitter using that hashtag. In addition, you can ask questions in the comment section of this Google Hangout. We have a wonderful group of panelists today, and I'm excited about this discussion. So I'd really love for each of the panelists to have an opportunity to take about 30 seconds and introduce themselves and tell what they do. We'll start from left to right, so with Catalina Escobar.
Thank you. I work in Colombia, South America, in teen pregnancy of girls in extreme poverty. Our model is called 360 Degrees Intervention, and it's about breaking cycles of poverty. We've been working in Cartagena the past 14 years. We work with 3,000 girls so far. And the whole idea is to provide them with a counseling, health, education, and it's a whole holistic approach. And within 2 to 4 years of intervention of each girl, these girls are able to move forward to get jobs and to break cycles of poverty.
Thank you, Catalina. Elizabeth?
Yes, hi. My name's Elizabeth, and I'm the social media director for Girls Globe. I will be live tweeting this event today on Twitter using hashtag IntegratedDev. So please go ahead and ask me questions during the Hangout, and we'll try to get to as many questions as we can so that the panelists can answer them. So, yep, hashtag IntegratedDev. Thanks.
Greg, go ahead.
Sorry. Good morning. My name is Greg Beck, and I'm the Director of Integrated Development for FHI 360, and I'm based here in Washington, D.C.
Joyce?
Hi, my name is Joyce Adolwa, and I am the Director of Education Programming at CARE USA, based in Atlanta.
Katya, go ahead.
My name is Katja Iversen. I'm the CEO of Women Deliver. We are a global advocacy organization working for the health, rights, and well-being of girls and women, with a particular focus on maternal and sexual and reproductive health and rights, but not only. We look at it as girls and women as in an integrated way, because we are not only health, we are body, we are soul, we are full of potential, and that has to come through development. And the world is at a tipping point right now where we see a lot of good things happening and convergence that is playing well into this.
Rose?
Hi, my name is Rose Wilcher. I am also with FHI 360, based in our office in North Carolina. I'm the Director of Research Utilization, based in our Global Health Population and Nutrition Group. And my work is really focused on accelerating the application of global health evidence in policy and practice. And my work has primarily been in the areas of sexual and reproductive health and HIV and gender integration.
Well, thank you so much. We're excited to get this discussion underway today. The first question I'd like to pose, and we're going to start with Greg, but so integrative development, it isn't a new concept. So what's different about the discussion and the need for it now? And we're going to start with you, Greg, on that.
Thanks, Diane. Maybe it might be helpful to first define integrated development for folks. And as we see it at FHI 360, integration refers to the process of coordinating work streams across sectors or disciplines to gain efficiencies and to gain amplified impact towards a common goal or set of goals. So using an integrated approach to addressing global problems, as you say, Diane, is not a new concept. We've actually been talking about it for some 30 years. I remember, integrated rural development was at the core of what we were doing when I was in the Peace Corps in the 80s. I think what's different now is that we live in a much more interconnected and complex world. A world where emerging economic, technological, and demographic shifts have created more demanding and sophisticated challenges. So our responses to those challenges really need to mirror this new complexity. We also have to start meeting people where they are. We really need to begin addressing the challenges that they face, especially those in poor communities, and in a manner that really reflects how they live their lives. I mean, none of us, after all, live our lives in a disjointed way, and our experiences aren't segregated. They're all interconnected. And so an integrated approach with its ability to meet multiple community needs, including the many stressors of poverty, really has the potential to be a more effective model for addressing human development challenges. And in order to truly improve the quality of people's lives in a sustainable way, it's time for the global development community to fundamentally shift how it has traditionally worked, and particularly as we enter the post-2015 development era. But we really need more evidence on when and where and how to integrate across sectors and disciplines. And that's what really the FHI 360's commitment around integration development is about, is building that body of evidence.
We can't hear you, Diane.
I'm sorry. Greg, just as a follow-up, can you tell us about FHI 360's new integrated development initiative and why FHI 360 has launched it?
Sure. Thanks, Diane. So through an FHI Foundation grant, we're investing $4 million over the next few years to better understand and promote the application of integrated solutions. And as part of that initiative, FHI 360 is examining the current evidence behind the notion that integration may be better than vertical programming. Mm-hmm. We're also committed to generating new and better evidence about this approach. So through what we and others learn, we'll develop technical guidance and resources on integration, which are meant to serve the broader development community. And through our signature discussion series, like the one we held around Beijing Plus 20 and other other events, convening and connecting with others, including business leaders, to foster meaningful exchanges about integrated solutions. And so FHI 360 saw a need, especially as we were transitioning to the SDGs, to advance the conversation on integrated solutions, and importantly, to generate evidence on integrated approaches. So we feel really well positioned to take a lead in this initiative with our partners due to our really deep research capacity, our technical expertise, and experience in implementing programs worldwide.
Wow, great. Thanks, Greg, so much for that background information, and I'm excited for us to delve more into and learning more about what FHI 360 is doing for integrative development solutions. I wanted to also pose the question to Katya and ask if you have anything to add. Why start this conversation now? What's the need for talking about integrative development?
As I said in the beginning, right now is a crucial time for girls and women. The world is at a tipping point. A new development agenda is in the making. A new global health strategy is in the making. And integrated development and integrated approaches and holistic thinking of people as being whole people is really needed if we want to see the progress. When you invest in the health, rights, well-being, economic empowerment, education of girls and women, everybody wins. But you can't if you only treat health as health and health services, we're not going to move the needle and we're not going to achieve what it is that we want to. It's a power cocktail, the health, rights, education and economicment of girls and women. It's a game changer. And it has proven positive ripple effects. But nothing comes of nothing, so it's also a very important time to advocate, to put the evidence to bear, to showcase how it works, because that's what the influencers, the game changers, and the decision makers need right now if we want to see a new development agenda that really takes this into consideration.
Thanks, Katya. And you touched on several key points, but one being that we really can't approach development for women and girls in silos. It has to be integrated. And Rose, you come at this with experience from with a technical background to integrated development. Why do you think we need to talk about this now?
Well, that's right. I think we've touched on a lot of the important issues right now. I mean, given that the global development community is more or less on board with this notion that we're not going to make much progress if half the world's population continues to be left behind, I think this commitment, this more explicit focus on women and girls in general is an important entry point or catalyst for more integrated programming in the post-2015 development agenda. Because regardless of what sector you work in, or the SDG toward which you're working, if you say you're committed to putting women and girls at the center of those efforts, then you have to consider how gender inequality may affect your ability to achieve your targets, your sector-specific targets. And in doing that, you may come to discover that interventions from other sectors may be needed to help you achieve your program goals. And so, you know, I really think that applying that gender lens can serve to promote more integrated programming that not only accelerates sector-specific progress, but can also advance gender equality.
Thank you, Rose. And I think you touched on key things as far as we having an integrated approach really can advance gender equality. And several of you here, most of you here, are working in the realm in different sectors, whether it be health or education or addressing issues of gender-based violence. So I wanted to turn to Catalina and ask, why is it important to integrate girls' education, health, and gender-based violence and other issues into programming? What type of impact do you see this having on the lives of women and girls in the particular work that you do? And can you maybe share a success story from your work?
Diane, I'm not listening. I'm sorry.
Okay. You're having some problems hearing? Okay. If we can turn that question to Joyce, then.
Sure, thank you. I think this is a very important conversation for us to be having at this point in time, given the reasons that have already been highlighted. For CARE, what is important is really harnessing and enhancing the inherent capabilities and the resources that are available to this particular demographic when we speak of women and girls. And our goal as an organization is to look at investing in girls as early as possible, because then we don't have to keep, investing in women as we look towards the future. So we are investing in both. But what is important to the question that you just raised is the need to not only look at multisectoral approaches in terms of sector approaches, but to really use the evidence that we've gathered in terms of understanding and excavating what it is that leads to the marginalization of women, of girls, whether it is a social marginalization based on ethnicity or tribal or whatever it is, and then bringing the different actors and the different resources that we have within the society to address those issues. For care, we have a guiding framework. We look at what it is that we need to do at the individual level to build that person's aspirations and capabilities in order to be able to advance their own development in that sense. For instance, if you think about education, what is it that we need to do in education to make it a truly transformative experience for the learner? At the same time, we are looking at influencing the structures. That means we are investing in advocacy. We are investing in movements, in making sure that the voice of the women and girls is being heard. And at the same time, we are also working to influence the social norms and social relations that these individuals interact with, so that we are creating a more enabling environment for both women and girls to thrive and to be active participants in their society. So when we think about integrated development, it is really the coming together of different facets of life. It's looking at the individual, as Kat just said, the individual as a whole, and how the different levels, the different layers in society come into play, whether they are social, cultural, whether they're political, and also looking at the individual capabilities and what enhancements need to be developed to make them thrive, to drive development. And when we talk about the development goals, the new sustainable development goals, I think for us it is critical to ensure that those goals are not independent of each other, that they are interconnected, and for governments to see them as interconnected. And also what is not said in those goals, because a lot of those goals tend to measure, sectorally. What is it that is not as explicit that needs to be uncovered? For instance, we talk about gender-based violence, but this doesn't always come up when you apply a gender lens. We talk about gender norms. What norms exist in society that inhibit women and girls to occupy certain spaces that they need to be a part of, and not just them being acted on, but them influencing and being part of that participatory process with the stakeholders that we work with.
Thank you, Joyce. Katja, do you want to add to that as well?
I would like to. As advocates, evidence is always good and important, and the evidence is fairly clear that when you invest in girls and women, everybody wins. So investing in girls' education makes a country's GDP go up. Investing in girls' education makes maternal mortality go down. Women who have access to maternal health services are more likely to use reproductive health services later and seek health for their own children, just as women who get fewer children are more likely to invest more in each child and break the cycle of poverty. We at the Women Deliver, we see it, and we see the success firsthand, both when we work with and talk to our young leaders in countries, but also they are the ones on the ground in the communities working to make change happen. And they don't do that from a siloed perspective. They do that with a broad view of the different needs. But also when we look at the UN, we have high hopes for the SDGs. Of course, there'll be something that we would like to have in that won't be in, but then let's get it into the implementation. But let's also try to look at it through a gender lens and see what is it that we need to invest in, exactly what are the action points that's needed there. Because we know that when you invest in the cross-cutting issues, there's a ripple effect of positive outcomes that both goes for the individual, the families, the communities, and whole societies.
Thank you, Katya. And I love what both you and Joyce said of, okay, what do we need to look at that's not being said and not being addressed? And as far as integration goes, I think in that conversation, where are the key pieces that are not fitting together? I'm wondering, Joyce, if you can speak to any challenges that you've seen in implementing integrated programs through CARE.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I think there are always challenges when you think about changing gender norms. It takes time, and you want to have accelerated change in the minimal amount of time to make it cost effective. And there is a whole conversation that is going on right now around what is the most cost effective way of doing X. And if we are looking at the whole side, that it takes time to change the perceptions of people around gender. It takes time to change social structures through advocacy, and it takes time to equip people with the skills and capabilities that they need so that they can progress, so that they can advance development for themselves and not only rely on other people to advance development for them. So of course time and the cost effectiveness factor is something big. The other issue is around measurement. Some of this, what we are trying to change, social change, measuring the degrees of change and what is meaningful within that change is another challenge, and looking at the progression from maybe not being gender sensitive to being gender transformational thinking and practice. That's we don't have very good metrics for measuring that type of change, and I think that needs to happen across sectors, and also measures that demonstrate the interconnectedness of what we are trying to do. Like how health, the combination of health, life skills in education, reproductive health, and the social positioning of young people. When you think about adolescents and their changes that they are going through, how empowerment happens differently at those different stages. How do you measure that and relate that to the effort that you're trying to accomplish? So it is the challenges are there, and of course there is always the right now the globe is at that point where we see conflict increasing. We have climate change, and all this influence development. And how do we help societies become more resilient? How do we, quote unquote, control for these aspects and anticipate them so that the work that we do really becomes sustainable when we think about sustainable development goals in that sense?
Thank you, Joyce. Catalina, are you back with us?
I'm having a lot of trouble, but I'm here.
Okay, I'm wondering if you can speak to any challenges that you've seen in implementing integrated development programs for women.
Well, first I need to tell you one thing. The evidence is very clear and it's out there. The reason why we're working with teen pregnancy is because it's what really perpetuates poverty in our nations, in the United States as well, but especially in Latin America. Latin America is the second region in the world that not only increased in teen pregnancy, but actually increased steadily. The first region integrated development, it's I agree. I cannot agree more on what Katya said. It's advocating. It's really showing results, hands-on, trying to really help these girls make it through, not repeating the same paradigms or their mothers and grandmothers. In Colombia, unfortunately, Colombia is the #1 country in South America with the highest teen pregnancy. 20% of women who give birth are girls. So what's important about it's the interconnection between the sectors. We do work the health approach. We work on reproductive rights, which is the #1 priority, because I'm going to tell you something. I read a study recently that said that if a girl is poor and she gets pregnant, her possibility to engage on a socially productive work in the future, it's very low. But if she gets pregnant by the second baby, her chances are 0. So for us, it's a key agenda, the reproductive health approach. #2, education. Education. And let me tell you something. There's a very big study right now going on in India that says that 1% of the girls that are engaging in their education system, that will represent $5.5 billion once those girls are going to be looking for a job. I mean, it is an interconnection between education and development. In terms of Colombia and Latin America, the figures I've had, which is very, very key in this conversation, is the relationship between teen pregnancy and poverty. Mm-hmm. I recently read a study that said that if Brazil, all of their girls postpone their pregnancy after the age of 20, that will create $3.5 billion in development. And so that is crucial. Teen pregnancy, if it is not addressed as a holistic approach with education, with healthcare, and with nutrition. I don't know if you've touched the subject of nutrition, but in Colombia we're having a lot of problems in malnutrition, especially in girls. So those are my thoughts.
Thank you, Catalina. We've now heard some of.
May I say something quickly?
Yeah, go ahead.
Katja.
Go ahead, Katja.
I think it's so right. Both point to the education, point to the data, because what gets measured gets done. And if we don't measure and we don't have the data, nothing gets done. Just a little comment on what do we anticipate will be missing in the SDGs that has a ripple effect. That is comprehensive sexuality education. Mm-hmm. And if we look at the benefits from education and we look at the benefits from both boys and girls that they know about, they know about their bodies, they know about sex, they know about saying yes and no, they know about the game rules, the whole comprehensive sexuality education. We're pushing tremendously hard to get it in. It's sensitive for some, as we say, many of the negotiators, they have amnesia, they forgot how it is to be young, and they forgot what it is that they need. But if we don't get it into the goals or the targets or the indicators, then let's get it in the integrated implementation.
Mm-hmm. Dan, let me jump on what Katja just shared and Catalina as well. One of the things that CARE is looking to do as we move forward and as we anticipate the implementation of the new SDGs, we are designing a new intervention. CARE is investing $7 million over the next 5-year period to really investigate some of these issues, to make sure the that we have in place includes more systematically leadership skills training, life skills training, because as part of preparing the youth, the young people for the future, we are going to have a comprehensive sexual and reproductive health element, and also we are really going to focus on the workforce preparation in terms of how ready are those young people. When you think about 10 to 15-year-olds, how ready are they at whatever point in their lives to begin to think about their markets, to begin to think about their society and their own positioning within that societies and ways they can begin to engage, so that when we're thinking about a 10-year-old, 5 years from now, they'll be 15. What choices are they making in terms of their reproductive health? the way they engage in sexual or not engage in sexual activity, the way they think about their future career when they're 20. What will we be seeing if we engage with them at 15 for us to be able to say, yes, they are becoming more and more empowered as we move along. So we are really excited about this new initiative. Of course, the whole question is, what does empowerment look like for girls in the 21st century? And we cannot forget the place of technology in advancing that level of empowerment and promoting the interconnectedness and the voice that is strengthened through technology. We are here on this Google Hangout using technology and speaking to hundreds of people across different places in the world. How do we make that voice accessible to marginalized societies, and so that we can, when we think about GBV, girls don't come out because it is not safe. But when you think about them having support online, them galvanizing the voice online and addressing this issue in their own societies, that can be a very, very powerful tool. But our education, the way the education is designed right now, we are still stuck in the 18th century, and we need to come to that point where we recognize as a global society the opportunity that is presented before us with these new SDG goals, and how we can really shape them so that they can have an impact, a transformative impact on the lives of marginalized girls and women.
Diane?
Yep, go ahead.
Sorry, can I just go back really quickly to one of the questions you asked earlier, sort of the primary challenges of integration. And I think of institutions as one of the big barriers. Institutions, first of all, just from a donor's perspective, in the way in which funding streams go out. To me, that's one of the biggest barriers that we need to solve. And the other one is just our own institutions in which we all work. Because first of all, many of us are set up to then respond to those donor institutions in a very fractured and siloed way. And it really does not promote taking a human-centered approach to understanding the development challenges of an individual, of a family, and of a community. And as we all know, those are very complicated and multifaceted, right? And the more you try to integrate, it just becomes messier, and it becomes more difficult, and it becomes slower. And so we need to have an understanding from the donors that it does take time, that we really need to understand the ecosphere in which we work. It's not just about combining sectors or about combining disciplines, but it's really understanding that ecosystem, that ecosphere, and it's about financing. Right? It's about institutions, it's about sustainability, it's about capacity development, and that takes time, and it takes an effort. And so I think, again, trying to align that approach with the challenges that donor institutions face is going to be one of the big hurdles that we need to try to figure out as we transition from the MDGs to the SDGs.
Greg, that's a great point. And just as a follow-up question, since we're talking about donors and how that plays into this whole integrative development process, what do you think it will take to convince donors to fundamentally change how they've supported programs over the last several decades?
Excuse me. So we're at a critical juncture, and we're starting to see a renewed interest from some of the major donors around integrated solutions, whether it's from the Gates Foundation, USAID, DFID, amongst others. You look at the policies at USAID, you look at, just for instance, youth policy, take a look at the local solutions, they talk about systems, they talk about integration. Where it's breaking down is when it gets down to the mission level. And so the management mechanisms and the flows of money do not support or correspond to integrated approach. And so it's really trying to figure out those mechanics and processes. So in fact, we're working with the Gates Foundation. In fact, what we found is the challenge within the foundation is not about what to integrate, but how to integrate. So I think that's a real institutional challenge that we all, whether you're a large donor or a large NGO or a community-based organization, whatever it may be, it's really trying to figure that out. So how do we approach our work with a much wider lens and look beyond the specific areas of our expertise and consider those other factors that every day the women and men of the communities are having to face? And so I think, again, that's, for me, where we really need to get a head around, and then producing that body of evidence that shows that, in fact, in most cases, 1 + 1 can or does equal 3, that there is an amplifying impact to blending or coordinating those streams, whether it's the sectors or disciplines or the other sort of elements of the ecosphere. So again, I think the more we can produce that evidence, the more we're going to help the donors make that pivot that we're all looking for and we're talking about today.
May I add on to that?
Yeah, go ahead.
Sure. Yes, no, I do completely agree with Greg on the point about evidence. I mean, I think, you know, it's easier to break down those silos that naturally tend to crop up when sector-specific funding exists. If you're able to say with confidence, if you want to achieve X, you have a better, quicker way of getting there if you integrate Y into your efforts. So totally agree with Greg on that point. The other thing I want to say, though, just about getting the donors on board, I also agree with Greg that there is burgeoning interest from donors on this topic of integrated development. But one of the really great things that has emerged out of the increased focus on women and girls is a mandate by many donors that implementers conduct a gender analysis at the outset of their programs. And a gender analysis is it's a way to take a systematic look at how underlying gender norms and inequalities in a particular community may affect your ability to achieve your outcomes. And you know, there are lots of existing tools and guidance to help you implement this process, but the neat thing that happens when you conduct a gender analysis is that you often identify issues that require solutions from other sectors. And so a gender analysis can be a very practical, applied way to not only put women and girls at the center of your efforts, but to also identify multisectoral strategies that would enable a more effective response. And again, if the donors are already mandating gender analyses as part of programming, then hopefully that will also mean they're on board with the integrated solutions that emerge from that.
Thanks, Rose. And can you also maybe speak into what else we might not know? What are some of the gaps in the evidence that's out there about integrated development? That's your realm of expertise, and I'm wondering if you would just speak to that a little bit more.
Sure. So, well, first of all, let me say that I do also 100% agree with Katya that the evidence is clear that if we invest in women and girls, everyone wins. I think that is absolutely true. And I also agree with what Catalina was saying about, you know, the health of girls, the nutrition of girls, education of girls, poverty of girls. All of that is inextricably linked, and there's pretty clear evidence on that as well. But where we have a lot of gaps in evidence is, as Greg was saying, is really how do we deploy multisectoral programs and what is the impact of those programs? And you know, you asked me what the gaps in evidence are related to integrated development, and in a way I think that's kind of an impossible question because when you think about it, there's almost an endless number of ways in which interventions from different sectors could be combined into integrated approaches for women and girls. And I don't think anyone has attempted to take stock of the evidence across all development sectors and every combination. But FHI 360 did undertake a pretty robust literature review focusing on interventions that combine health and other development sectors. And you know, frankly, what we found was that the evidence is really mixed. And just as importantly, what we found from this review is that many integrated development approaches are being designed and implemented, but the vast majority are not being implemented with an evaluation component that's going to demonstrate what the impact of that integrated approach is. And so we do need to broaden the evidence base around what strategies work well when they're combined. When should we not combine strategies? I think there are probably many cases in which single sector solutions may in fact be the best solution, and which combinations are really cost effective. And with respect to women and girls in particular, I just want to also echo what Joyce was saying. We have some room to improve on measurement. So when we're evaluating integrated approaches, you know, how are we measuring the impact of these approaches on the lives of women and girls? And we need to know which integrated development approaches are going to transform women's lives and really push the needle on gender equality.
May I just jump in?
Yep.
And it's about evidence.
Sorry,
Evidence
but
is,
may I?
evidence is absolutely key in advocacy, but it's also key to package evidence and package the solutions we know we have and what benefits comes from action, and to package it in a way that makes it memorable and understandable. We need to make it so delicious to invest in girls and women, and to make it easy for decision makers to choose girls and women. And advocacy combined with good communication, with good messaging, can achieve that. And so evidence is the base, but the advocacy and messaging and communication is the vehicle. And we cannot stop with evidence. We have to take it that mile further and get it to the decision makers. And that's why we see in Women Deliver that the combination of researchers, of messengers, of advocates, of the people who make action on the ground, that is so important. And we need to work together. And we need to listen to the people this is about, and the voices from the girls and the women and the young people who live and die in the communities, because then we both have the fuel for the head and the fuel for the heart that can make action happen.
May I say something? I totally echo what Katja is saying in terms of the meaningful and substantive engagement of both the beneficiaries and the stakeholders, and also related to data. It is also equally important when we think about packaging data to report back to those beneficiaries, for them to be able to see the impact of what their change, because they are part of that change, is enabling. Because in a lot of instances, we work with communities, we are doing things on them, so to speak, we are acting on them, and we don't necessarily consider them as part of the effort, and that data that we collect from communities is showcased in other places, and they are not part of that experience. So I cannot, it has to be that we are sharing this information across the board so that they see how change is impacting their own household, for instance, their neighbors, the communities they live in, and the changes that are happening, so that it can be sustainable change. Otherwise, they'll not be able to connect those dots that, oh, it's because I changed my perception of educating my daughter along with my son, that now my daughter along with so-and-so's daughter has a job opportunity at X, and how all those, the interconnectedness and the communication has to be across all levels.
Thank you, Joyce. Greg, did you want to speak to that as well?
Actually, just to fully support what Katja was saying, that again, the building the evidence and advocacy together is so important, because again, just because we have evidence doesn't mean people change their behavior or their actions automatically. So blending that and putting advocacy right up front and center with that building of the body of evidence, so perfectly stated, and I fully support that.
Can I make another suggestion in this conversation? The experience we have with working with women and girls is that usually, and when you work in the field, you need to find a model that engages or focuses in 20 in order to get 80 output. That means high social impact. It's really good to go woman by woman, girl by girl, but once you find this model that actually it's world-class, put it that way, you need to invest money and create impact and, of course, measurement. Otherwise, you're not doing anything. Advocacy is great. In my point of view, here in Colombia, we're transcending barriers because we're now engaging with public policy. And let me tell you something more. In Colombia, unfortunately, we're still having internal conflict with the guerrilla and paramilitaries, which means that, unfortunately, women and girls are tools of war. So in my country, which is still a country underdeveloped, if you really want to be miserable, you just have to fulfill two requirements: being poor and being a girl. Because if that happens, you're recruited by the guerrilla, or you're a sexual slave of the paramilitaries, or you're a teen mother, or you're sexually abused, or you die of hunger, or you're a victim of violence, or all of the above. And I'm talking about 6 key elements here. So that's why it's not only having the evidence out there, but actually creating the impact and transcending barriers. In our organization, we are already escalating the model. We're starting in Panama. We already signed for Bogota. We're signing for Mexico and Guatemala. Because in the whole holistic approach and an integrated development, all these things sound so great, but actually doing it, actually empowering the girls is what is the key. It's the hands-on and how you escalate it. So basically, I totally agree about what Rose said and what Katia said. And about evidence is good, but having the model and all the things you have out there in condensated in one model is what, and if you demonstrate in numbers and measurements that you're really breaking cycles of poverty, that's what I think is the key issue.
This is such a good debate. If I may just jump in once again, I get so excited about this. I think we need a change in the framing. For the longest time, we have seen girls, and to some extent women, as victims, and and we have looked at the problems. We also need to look at, and I think it's a mind change, we need to look at them as full of potential and change makers, powerhouses. We evidence shows, and we have moved that potential. When you unleash that, if you fuel that potential of girls and women, you see development, you get development, you accelerate development. So focus on the potential. Don't ignore the problems, you have to address them, but focus on the potential as girls and women as agents of change. Because that speaks to also the private sector. Women are producers, reproducers, and consumers, and change makers. And we need all good forces here, and we need to work with whoever can make that change happen. Whether government, some do it, some don't. Private sector, they deliver a lot of health, and they have to be recognized for that and be good at that. And individuals, organizations, CSOs. But look at women, look at girls, not from a victim perspective, but from a potential perspective.
May I jump in? I'm equally excited about this conversation. One thing I would say that I haven't had yet is the role of men, engaging men and boys in empowerment, because we do know, if for math, for instance, if 2 to the power of 0, if you're not doing anything on men, is equals 1. It's actually just minimizing the effort that we are putting in. So it becomes very critical for us to understand how to meaningfully engage men as a critical part of the transformation that we need to see in society, not as stepping stones for the empowerment of women and girls, but also looking at their placement in society and how the gender norms that exist have perpetuated that for their benefit and detriment in some instances. So that we are not skewing the balance, and maybe 50 years from now we are back talking about the empowerment of boys, men and boys, but really looking at the holistic society, because it is both men, women, it is boys and girls that need to be part of this effort, so that they see how their perceptions of the other has generated this unequal balance in society.
Thanks, Joyce, for that comment as well. And I think we all here on this Hangout, we represent different organizations working for similar things. We represent men, women, boys, girls. I just want to bring it back to you, Greg, to ask how how can we work together? How, as development practitioners, can we work together towards integrated development solutions that are sustainable? What changes do you want to see moving forward in this conversation? I think you are muted. There you go.
Sorry about that. I think the more we can have these global conversations, the better. You know, I notice that we have, there's a lot of similar conversations out there. There's the folks that are out there around the clusters of HIV/AIDS and family planning, talking about integration. There's the population health and environment. There's the environment, energy, water, sanitation folks. So all of them starting to look at and explore and building a body of evidence. How might we be able to come together actually and sort of begin building a shared sort of lexicon around this, building a shared body of evidence, I think is going to be extremely important. In fact, there's a number of organizations coming together now around a global platform for integrated development and building out a body of tools and frameworks and evidence. It's called Locus, and I can share that later with folks that are interested. I think that's going to be really important to just make us wiser and smarter in the way in which we approach integrated solutions, and it also, I think, has the opportunity to influence the way in which the donors are deciding upon investments. So I think that's, you know, that's going to be really important, and so I think we would really call on both private and development sectors to allocate resources to evaluate and understand when integrated approaches work best so that we can all learn from what works and what doesn't work.
Thank you, Greg, and I'm sure those watching will want to learn more about those resources as well. The conversation, we have about 10 minutes left, and the conversation is really buzzing online. So people have been asking questions live, and they're anxious to pose those questions to you all in this discussion. So I want to turn it over to Elizabeth to ask a few questions that have been coming in via Twitter and the hashtag #IntegratedDev.
Thanks, Diane. And as Diane said, it's been a great conversation so far, and on Twitter it's really been flowing nicely. And so we have a question here from Insaf House. I'm sorry if I mispronounced your name. But she wanted to expand. Joyce, you said something about how a challenge is how we can anticipate problems so that the work that we do is actually sustainable. And she would like you to expand on that. If you know any solutions, or what are the next steps to take? And she also asked, the solutions are here and they're available, but what are the micro steps that we must take in order to make sure they're sustainable?
Thank you. Sorry, I dropped off. My batteries died, and I had to quickly come back and connect. And so I missed the name of the person who asked that very good question. I think that's a big question, and I remember reading somewhere on the Futures online magazine that being able to predict the future or anticipate what is going to happen is going to be the #1 skill that all people need to have. And I think with the only way we can anticipate is to do what my colleagues have said here, to really conduct good analysis of the issues. What are the underlying causes of the situation in the context that we are working with? And therefore, so that when we think about a child who's going to be growing up, we can anticipate based on where they are in their society, based on their gender, based on, you know, the resources they have, they will face X and Y issues as they grow up. And so how are we able to address them now versus waiting for them to happen on them for us to then react to the situation based on global trends? You know, what is happening around that society at the sub-regional, at the regional, and what's influencing it at the global level? Is it, can it be controlled or not? You know, when we think about climate change, how is that going to look like in Sunamganj in Bangladesh over the next 5 years, and how do we begin then to have those conversations now so that Sunamganj is not flooded, completely by that point, but that we are anticipating that these shocks are going to come, and how do we build in resilience in our programming as governments, as actors in governments, in our education systems, when you think about every sector. So it really comes from having a good base of data collection, and being able to monitor that impact as we go along. And the other piece I might add is agility. Often in the development context, we think, yeah, just because we integrated this program in this way, in this context, and it worked, we replicated it in this other community and it worked, then we should do a whole lot of replicating the exact same thing in multiple contexts with the hope that we'll get the same results. But we know it doesn't always work, and what we need to get better at is looking at what is the catalytic aspect of that model that made it work in different places, in different contexts, and that's what needs to be scaled up. That is what we need to move forward and advance. So anticipation, it's a complex. It's complex, but I think it is doable if we have the right basis of data and collecting that systematically across our work, and if we are collaborating and sharing that information across to the different players, so that we're all coming together to address those underlying issues.
May I quickly just add on to that? Because I really appreciate that question about the micro steps that are needed to make this happen, because as I think about it, this conversation has in fact been pretty macro, pretty high level. I mean, we're talking about the need to get, champions from different sectors in the same room talking to each other in order to build the political will to advance integrated development and get the donors on board and all of that. But when it comes to programming and implementation, the devil is really in the details. And that is where I think, more of this how-to evidence and documentation and guidance is really going to be essential to seeing more widespread implementation of integrated solutions. So I really appreciate that question.
Thank you, Rose, and I agree. I think that we need to look both at this both from a grassroots perspective and a macro perspective. This conversation has been so great, and unfortunately, an hour flies by quickly when you're really having good discussion. So to kind of close out our Hangout, I really want to just give each of you about 30 seconds to say some closing remarks and just wrap up some additional thoughts that you might have regarding this conversation, and then I'll close this at the end. So if we want to start, Catalina, with you, just 30 seconds of some final thoughts.
Well, yes. I think we all talk the same language about women and girls, and we all know that we have a responsibility in our jobs to continue working and to continue putting women and girls in the top of the conversation in our daily lives, in our countries.
Greg, if you want to just say a few closing thoughts.
Sure, thanks, Diane. I think just a couple of things. One is, let's make a commitment to turn the lens on ourselves, and how is our own institution supporting or not supporting integrated approaches. Then let's all work together globally in building out that body of evidence and working, again, in a really concerted way to advocate for change from the major donor institutions and policymakers. And then finally, let's continue to make that global commitment to take a human-centered approach to understanding the development challenges and the way in which we design and invest our resources.
Great. Thank you. Joyce?
Yeah, I would echo much of what my colleagues have said. I think as we move forward and look at the next phase of development, let us look at collaboration with the beneficiaries that we are working with as partners to this effort, and not just as people who are acted on. And let us look at a meaningful engagement, their meaningful engagement in data, in the review of that data, and the implications of what we find, and how then we can build from that with them to really change their lives, because that is what we are looking at. Societies change because people change, and how do we enhance that effort and amplify it across the globe.
Thanks, Joyce. Katya?
I have a message, an ad, and a tweet. The message is that girls and women are drivers of development, and we need the integrated and holistic approach to their lives. And the ad is that next year, in May 2016, Women Deliver will bring together 6,000 people in Copenhagen to the big Women Deliver conference. And key in that is integration. We will look at how do we implement the SDGs so they matter most for girls and women, and we will do it from an integrated and multisectoral approach. So be there or be square. And then the tweet is, girls and women are at the heart of sustainable development. Hashtag integrated dev. Hashtag SDGs. Hashtag break the silos.
It's great. Rose?
Great, thanks. I have really, really enjoyed this conversation today. And I guess I would close by saying, you know, I feel like in a lot of development meetings that I go to, there's this yearning for slick technological solutions that can be easily introduced and scaled up to reach lots of people in a short time span. And, you know, I think, as was kind of alluded to earlier, we need to acknowledge that achieving women's empowerment and gender equality and delivering integrated solutions is complex, and these things don't always lend themselves to such slick solutions, but it can be done. And my takeaway would be that, you know, we need to have evidence and the translation and advocacy of that evidence driving the efforts.
Thank you so much, Rose. And I just want to thank everyone who has participated, both online and you all as amazing panelists. I want to thank FHI 360 for co-hosting this with us. The exciting thing is this conversation is not over, and it will still continue. So I just want to encourage you, if you're interested in more information, you can continue to follow the hashtag #IntegratedDev. You can also visit FHI 360's website, which is fhi360.org, to see what they're continually doing on this topic of integrated development, as well as the other amazing organizations that we have on this panel as well. So thank you again for joining this discussion, and I hope you have a great day.
Thanks a lot to you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks,
Wonderful.
man.
Wonderful.
Thanks, everybody.